So, Dave, I don't know if Dave stepped away. Um, you're next on the agenda. Hi. So I live in North Cambridge near Jack's Gas and Fast Phil's Haircuts. I think they're still there. And Dave Rogers is my neighbor, and Dave is our state rep for parts of Arlington, Belmont, and Cambridge. And Dave has been championing getting funding for DCR, who owns the land, who the Alewife Brook Reservation State Park, which is all the land along the brook, or rather, they control it. It's Arlington land, it's Somerville land, it's Cambridge land, but it is owned by DCR, and they manage it. And people have brought up the issue of trash and maintenance and so forth. So Dave has been championing trying to get more funding for DCR. And Dave, maybe you can tell us what's been going on lately and what your expectations are for the coming legislative year and the new Healy Driscoll administration. And I think there was also some funding that you recently got for DCR work. So anything you want to share about issues relevant to this area would be great.
Great. Well, thanks for that introduction, Gwen. And as I said, very nice to be with you all. I'm not sure that I'm the state rep for all of you, probably not, but again, probably for a good number of you I am, and it's great to be here. I was just reelected, and I'm very grateful for that and the opportunity to be of service. I don't want to talk at too great a length. I'd rather listen as much as I talk, because I'm sure I'll learn as much from you as you might from me. I'll speak more generally at first. Environmental protection and addressing climate change and has been a priority of mine in the legislature. I'm in my 10th year. I worked at EPA, was not a long stint there, but I did work in the Environmental Protection Agency. I worked for a clean energy company some years ago. So I'm not really new to issues pertaining to environment and protecting clean air and clean water. And again, I've made that a priority while I've been in service. And we've done a lot on the environment. We just passed a roadmap law to get Massachusetts to net zero by 2050. That was at the beginning of the session. We built on that with a new law on a lot of clean energy innovations, transitioning the MBTA to electric buses, expanding offshore wind, improving the efficiency of appliances. And I won't go on at too great a length, because that's a very complex law with many different provisions. If you're on my email list, I sent out an email recently with very lengthy description of it. And if you're not on my email list, please sign up. I send it out just once a month with all the things I'm working on. As to the Alewife specifically, a law that I co-sponsored became law last year. And that is, I think, let me get an act promoting awareness of sewage pollution in public waters. That's a notification law that mandates publicly owned sewage treatment operators and notify the public when these discharges occur. The way people can find out is like reverse 911 or various other means, however you get your information. And those notices have to go out within 2 hours. I think that's a really important law about public awareness and public notice. So I imagine some of you may know about it, but if you didn't, that's a brand new law that just became law last year. Regulations have gone final now. In other words, we passed the statute at the state legislative level, and then the agencies have time to promulgate regulations. That's been done. So I think that was a really important development. I also secured an earmark for cleanup I forget who it was at the outset who said, just seeing trash. I've seen, I once saw actually a shopping cart. I don't know how this happened. Someone dumped a shopping cart right at the corner of Mass Ave and Alewife Brook Parkway, Route 16. And you just see all sorts of debris and garbage. And so I secured an earmark in the state budget for DCR, the Department of Conservation and Recreation, to come out and do a cleanup. So I think that's obviously a positive thing. I got tens of thousands of dollars to do that. I, do think that may be an ongoing problem, but it's one that we have to stay on top of. The CSO issue is, and I'm happy to both listen and talk about it, is, as I'm sure everyone on this call knows, a complex issue. And I've been in meetings with MWRA about it. I've been in meetings and talked to people in Cambridge about it. There have been efforts to close some of them, to remediate, but obviously we still have CSOs. And I don't want to grossly oversimplify a relatively complex issue, but a big part of it is money. To really thoroughly address the CSO issue is, depending who you talk to, but it's extraordinarily expensive. Millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars. And I've, again, been on calls with MWRA, with Cambridge, folks in Arlington. We do know the so-called 100-year floodplain. I mean, we know with rainfall data, with climate change, really on two levels, both the Amelia Earhart Dam, the concern of sea level rise from climate change, and then more significant rainfall events. So both of those factors play into planning and analysis of how to, of what we're up against and what we need to plan for. There is a new master plan for Alewife in the works, and I think the kind of issues that you all focus on and that I focus on need to be part of that conversation, and will be, I believe. So, again, as I said at the outset, I don't want to sort of give a monologue and go on at too great a length, but those are just a few things on my mind. The new law we got for notification to the public, an earmark I secured for cleaning up the area, and then this big meta or macro issue of that will be with us for, I dare say, some years to come, of how to address CSOs. I mean, we know the amount of discharge. I had the figures in front of me just as I thought about speaking to you tonight, but it's a staggering number, the amount of effluent that so it needs to be addressed, and it's top of mind for me. So I think I'll leave it at that for now. And again, just very nice to be with you, and look forward to conversation. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
First slide, Kristen.
yeah, I'm going to share my screen if I can. I think I
It's a slideshow time.
Yeah. Okay. Hold on a second. My puppy is annoying me. Okay. All right. So the first thing we want to do is just go over everything that we've been up to since our last community meeting. And the last community meeting, hold on, my dog is choking me. All right. The last the last big public CSO meeting happened on June 29th. The turnout for this meeting was really good. I think there were 150 people there or something like that. Our supporters provided comments and asked questions, including many of the people who are here tonight. Ann McDonald, Beth Malofchik, Aram Holman, Michael Quinn, Matthew Carlino, Susan Stamps, Paige Gromfin, Aaliyah Atlas, Gwen was there, Don Seltzer made some comments, Julie Wood from Charles River Watershed Association and Stephen Perkins from Mystic River Watershed Association were there to ask questions. Our main message was that we wanted the CSO permittees, who are Somerville, Cambridge, and MWRA, to consider the effects of climate change in their new combined sewer overflow planning. And we also asked them for more public participation and an end to sewage pollution in the Alewife Brook. On July 9th, a few of us went out onto the river to check the sediment depth. We wanted to look at the depth of the sediment today compared to the depth of the sediment that was measured in a 1988 Alewife Brook sediment study. We had a 5-foot steel rod with a rule scale ground onto it and a hand-built canoe. That canoe was built by David Stoff, who is a member of Save the Alewife Brook, and he's here on the call tonight. We dropped the boat into the water at John Wald Park in Cambridge. It's no surprise that the amount of sediment has increased since 1988, given 3 decades of sewage discharges and infrequent removal of branches and trash. At the center of the little river opposite MWRA's CSO, we measured a sediment depth of approximately 36 inches. That's double the 18 inches recorded in 1988. Further upstream at 20 Acorn Drive, the sediment measurement was 48 inches. That's another increase of 18 inches over the 1988 measurement. We also measured sediment at the canoe launch in Arlington, adjacent to Lafayette Street, where the sediment depth was 48 inches. That's 4 feet of sediment in the narrow concrete channel. And I've got a picture of that narrow channel here.
Kristen, you know that your mouse is on your photograph, which makes it generate text.
Sorry. Is that better? Okay. So now is really the time that we need to be considering dredging the Alewife Brook. Removing that sediment could provide immediate benefits in terms of capacity, flow, and improved water quality. The EPA has pointed out that removing the sediment would increase capacity in the brook, which could help reduce flooding. And we think that federal infrastructure law funds could help get this done. I wanted to show you guys quickly a little video here that we shot of the little river on that canoe that day. And just look at how beautiful it is. The little river is not channelized. The water quality is not very good, but just look at how beautiful it is, and compare this scene to the other picture that I showed you of this channelized brook. This is just so sad. But removing that sediment, 3 to 4 feet of sediment could be removed, which could reduce flooding problems. And it's something that the EPA has asked for recently. On August 7th, we took a tour of the MWRA's Jewel, the Deer Island wastewater treatment plant. And I pointed out here that the peak capacity of Deer Island is 1.2 billion gallons of wastewater a day. And while we were on that tour, David Stoff spoke with Stephen Cullen from MWRA about odor control on the Alewife Greenway, specifically at the Alewife Brook sewer siphon near Bicentennial Park. Bicentennial Park is where Alewife Greenway meets Mass Ave. As a result of David Stoff's inquiry, the MWRA sealed the siphon access with clear caulking, which you can see in this bottom photo. And that solution worked for that one area. It would just smell so terrible. You would gag when you walked past this siphon. There are opportunities for the MWRA to make more improvements like this to improve odor control. On October 8th and 9th, we took part in the Honk Fest art and info table, and then we marched in the parade, and we actually got to meet Mayor and sax player Valentine, as you can see in this photo. That was really wonderful. And here we are in the parade. We dressed in our red t-shirts and carried ghost fish puppets. We were led by seahorses and Sarah Petey's Big Blue, the goddess of clean water. The following folks marched in the parade with us and contributed: Cicely Miller, Sarah Petey, Kara Casey and her family, Alita Castillo, Sue Janowitz, Ann McDonald, Crystal Meyer, Maggie Starvish, Beth Malofchik, Gilbert Martin, Matthew DeRamer and his family, Cullen Malone, Gerda Brown, Thomas Close, Joel Snyder, Veronique Bailey, Monique McNally and Barg, Gerda Brown, Sandy Dermaskin, Diane Martin, Paige Gromfin, Jonathan Forbes, Jean Devine, David Stoff, Gwen Spieth, myself, and a couple members from the Mystic River Watershed Association. And it was such an amazing event. There were so many people lined on the street, on the sidewalk, along Mass Ave, walking into Harvard Square, and we were shouting, "Stop dumping sewage into Alewife Brook." And it was just to see the expression on people's faces. I mean, we had a lot of support from people. I think people just do not know that this is happening. And everybody knows the word Alewife because of the Alewife Tea Station. A lot of people don't know that there's a brook there. It's kind of hidden. That was really just a wonderful event. On September 22nd, Cambridge, Somerville, and MWRA sent letters to the DEP, that's the State Environmental Protection organization, and they are agreeing to including climate change projections in their CSO modeling, and they are adding more public meetings to this planning process, but they are also asking for an additional 3 years. But we see this as a tremendous victory to get them to rewrite their modeling to include climate change projections is huge. On October 31st, we had a ghost fish art installation in front of Somerville's CSO, and we had an interview with local cable news, which was really good. And we had a walk along the brook from Cambridge to the Mystic River with folks from Mystic River Watershed Association, Green Cambridge, and a company called Interfluve, a couple of fluviologists, people who study rivers and rehabilitate rivers, to discuss what might be possible for the Alewife Brook. And we talked about dredging, dechannelization, and river restoration. On November 10th, we confirmed that the fence, Somerville's fence, which is meant to protect people from falling into the sewer outfall, had been repaired at our urging. And you can see how nice the new fence looks. Oh, I've got my mouse again. Sorry about that. November 21st, we were at Somerville Farmers Market with an info stand. And on that same day, we wrote to Mass DEP asking for an immediate update to the Alewife Master Plan for the area from the Mystic River to the Alewife T, because we're afraid that if we don't find a way to start working on this, the brook itself, it's going to get left out of this plan. It's going to get left out of the CSO. And we're looking for dechannelization, dredging, bank stabilization, and native plantings. And we're hoping that Somerville, Cambridge, and MWRA will help pay for a new Alewife master plan, so that we can apply for federal infrastructure funds before they're gone. And that Alewife master plan will be necessary, that updated plan will be necessary for the CSO control plan, what they call alternatives analysis, which is when Somerville, Cambridge, and MWRA will be talking about green and gray infrastructure that will affect water flows to the brook. This month we'll be talking with Mystic River Watershed Association and also with Representative Rogers and other legislators about trying to get this Alewife master plan update going. And then these are our secret strategy ideas. And but mainly, I think what we want to start talking with folks about is what ideas you all have for the new Alewife plan to end sewage pollution. I wanted to include in this discussion our email petition, which we have approximately almost 1,000 people have signed this now. When someone signs this petition, it gets emailed to Cambridge city councilors. It gets emailed to Somerville's mayor, and it gets emailed to Pat Jalen, as well as the MWRA. And it's basically everything. Like, I look at this document now, this is almost a year old, and everything that we've asked for here, I think is perfect. I'm not sure I would change much to this. So I think that when we go into this meeting on the 15th, there's a big meeting on the 15th that we need everybody to come out for. These are the things that we're going to be asking for. But why don't we open up discussion to everyone here about what they would like to see in the new Alewife plan to end sewage pollution.
So let me unshare your screen and people raise hands to speak, I think. Okay, please raise your hand so we can recognize you.
Let me just first say, just to clarify, in case, just to make sure everybody's on the same page, the meeting that Kristen is talking about on December 15th is the next step in the legally mandated, it's basically a leftover from the Boston Harbor cleanup plan, where Massachusetts, the Water Resources Authority, MWRA, Cambridge, and Somerville, also known as the polluters, the ones who dump their CSO discharges into the brook, they have to come up with another 20-year plan for basically what they're supposed to be doing is eliminating CSOs. And so these are supposedly the steps towards doing that. We want that actually to be a plan to eliminate CSOs. So when they do the alternatives analysis, we don't want them to say, we could do this, but we won't because it's too expensive, or we could do that, but we won't because it's too expensive, etc. We want them to actually implement changes. So just to update that, the next meeting's on the 15th, Thursday, the 15th at 6, and we would love it if everybody came and said their piece. Anyway, I will cede the floor to Annie, whose hand is up, and anybody else can either raise their hand or put a question in the chat.
Hi, yeah, I just want to, I have to leave very shortly, so I just want to say that, as I mentioned before, I've been involved to some degree in this for a very long time, including when the development that happened in the Silver Maple Forest happened within a floodway that Cambridge permitted, and this continued kind of Green Cambridge idea where they allow this development all to happen very often in floodways, contributing to what could be more, more issues, claiming no money for I don't know how long, continually getting variances. I teach at MIT in the Urban Studies department. I'm a lecturer there and have been trying to think of ways to get them involved, since that might be a free way to get some visibility. But I put my number in there and everything, and yeah, I'll definitely be, my students are done on Wednesday, so I'll have some time after that, and I definitely want to be involved in the all of this. So anyway, I've got to go, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'd love to have your students get involved.
Thank you, Annie.
Anyone else have thoughts? Want to share?
Beth Malofchik has an idea.
Is your hand up? I don't see it. Where is she? Beth?
Hi, I have ideas. But let me, before I share my creative idea that I have shared with Kristen, I really think that we need to totally refute the notion that it's too expensive to close the CSOs, or that it's too expensive to stop releasing raw sewage that ends up in the backyards and basements of East Arlington and wherever else it ends up. I think that is, for me anyway, is just an absolute priority. And maybe part of that is doing some shouting from rooftops. And part of that is increasing the number of signatures on the petition. So, and I'm happy to help out any way you think, brainstorm, whatever, Kristen, David, on that one. But I think it's essential to get more signatures on that petition. My idea, and maybe it's part of an info blast effort, but my idea is I go to a lot of art museums. I'm green, but I also like art, and I picked up the recent art scope, and in the recent art scope it has a picture, and if I can show this to you, here you go, of this wall at a museum in Duxbury, and it's all herring. And I saw that wall and I thought, wow, it's beautiful. And we could use that. Wouldn't that be nice to have, and tie it in and use it as, tie it into closing the CSOs, making the Alewife Brook dechanneled and viable and vibrant, and tie it into the greater Mystic River watershed. So we could have 3 sites for which is a tiled mosaic wall showing herring. We could have a tiled mosaic wall showing alewife, and have sites for such a wall on the Mystic River, on the Alewife Brook, and on Millbrook, which Ellen Cohen mentioned. Ellen and I worked together as part of the Friends of Cook's Hollow. And so that was my idea that I shared with Kristen, and she has the link and everything. We can share that with all of you. for this place in Duxbury, but I further thought that it would be a great way also to get these different organizations working together, both the Arts Council in Arlington, with Save Alewife Brook, with Mystic River Watershed, and relevant organizations in Cambridge and Somerville, to really have a, I tend to look at things holistically, to really have a cooperative effort in celebrating our natural resources and habitat, but reclaiming them. So that was my idea.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If anybody has joined the meeting and they haven't added their name and town and email address to the meeting chat, could you do that now? Thanks.
And Anne McDonald has her hand up.
And is, yeah.
Oh, yes. Hi. Beth, thanks for sharing your idea. I know there's the Alewife on the Stones, and I don't remember the artist's name as you enter the bikeway away from the Alewife Tea Station. So we already have a precedent for seeing Alewife in stone. But I guess I'm more interested in, and I'm a designer, so I definitely support art in the space as a way to activate the space and involve community. But I guess I'm still always puzzling a little bit bigger than that, and that's why I really appreciate all the representatives from Green Cambridge and the Mystic River Association and the worry originally early in the call about the Amelia Earhart Dam. As I still am really having trouble understanding, even once we've done that area in Cambridge, the stormwater area that won awards, and that cost a lot of money, but I don't understand the impact that has on the modeling. And I feel like if we I wish there was more accessible ways that the modeling that's being done. And even though I've looked at all the historic plans, I've looked at all these plans, I still feel like I don't quite get what the impacts are in other words, ways to take that modeling out of the reports and make it accessible to the general public. So not so much me, but so that we can help people. And I really feel like I'm never sure if some of this, sea level change is incorporating the things that have already been changed or the things we imagine changing. So I guess it's a plea to continue the work that you constantly are doing, I feel like already on all these groups, to make things accessible to the general public, but still feel like we're a little far away from understanding, especially if it's a dry season and nothing's happening. People can't imagine the other consequences. People are saying, oh, that was 20 years ago, or that'll be in 2070. So I don't have any specific suggestions other than I think continuing to make sure it doesn't stay in reports that aren't accessible.
There will be an opportunity for you to ask questions about the modeling at that December 15th meeting. I think as far as we know, the main thing that they're going to be talking about is how they're incorporating climate change projections into the modeling. I wonder too, it's a bit of a black box.
Very much so. You don't really understand if they already taken into account, the variances or the plans for the 20 years, or is it based on current data, or it does feel very black box like in these scenarios. So.
Our reports, but they're very technical. Maybe that should be more accessible.
Ann Stewart?
Hi. For me, just thinking as a member of the public, the word sewage is a scary word. And people can be motivated by art. I too have been a designer in my past, but I'd like to see them get motivated by fear. And so what I want to know is, are there stats or data on CSOs and public health along the Mystic River and Alewife Brook? And can we also talk about damage to private property? Are there stats on that? Because that to me is alarming. Oh, my kid is going to get sick. I mean, we don't know if the kid's going to get sick. We don't know if somebody's property is now permanently damaged. It's going to cost a lot of money and their insurance isn't going to cover it because their basement has been flooded. Thanks a lot.
I think the answer to that is partly that when people have been flooded in the past, they weren't aware of the fact that sewage, they were busy basically trying to, bail out their basement, and people were getting sick, but there wasn't public record keeping about who was ill and what damage was done. I think we really need to not wait for a major, storm like the ones they've had, and storms are hitting people in unusual places. Like if you think about Sandy in New York, that hit New York City in a way that it just took everybody's by surprise. We don't need to wait for a major storm where all of the crap that's in the brook is in people's houses. Unfortunately, we don't have that data, but it doesn't take a great deal of imagination. If you go down and look at the brook right now, it's quite full, and then it's going to rain on Tuesday. There's no room for any major event. And I think, and we do know that there is contaminated sediment there from the dumping of industry that was there. So at any rate, I mean, yeah, I don't know that we have that data particularly. Diane?
Yeah, I would like to see some emphasis put on the connection between the brook and the major flooding of the brook, and how the reach of that. I think it's really easy for people to be thinking in terms of this affects a very small group of people who happen to live right along Alewife Brook. And everybody at this meeting knows that that's not true, but I feel like there's not enough people that know that they don't have a real clear idea of how vulnerable East Arlington, all of East Arlington, all of North Cambridge is to a major flood event. And so I think the more we can tie in the sewage problem in the Alewife Brook with the larger community, I think the better it is for us. Thank you.
David Stoff?
Am I audible? If I am, it's very fortuitous that I'm speaking right now, because this notion of a public health burden being placed on Arlington should fall squarely on the permittees, on MWRA, on Cambridge and Somerville, as an element in the alternatives analysis, which begins on January 1st next year. So there's a lot of places within the scope of work that the MWRA has developed where this concern could be addressed. But I think it's very important that it is addressed. And while I appreciate all of our efforts to detail how these burdens, that they exist and how they affect us, I really think that this is something that the CSO permittees have to do, and they have to do an extraordinarily thorough and detailed job about it, because at the end of this process, they are going to try and downgrade the water quality of the Alewife Brook. And it's a reasonable community demand that we are able to have evidence to fight that, and that the burden is on the permittees because they are the people applying to downgrade the water quality standard. And with that completed, I want to make a pitch for a personal project. I really want to get together an odor control team, a group of people who are willing to walk the brook and map odors, because we need that data. It's either going to be in a permit fight or during the alternatives analysis or the modeling of the system, the characterization of the existing system. But unless we have something beyond like, I smelled this one day, something more than anecdotal evidence, we're going to be unable to force the permittees to do anything. And since they plan to let us live with these discharges until we are dead, we should at least have livable conditions. Okay. Now somebody tell me how to take my hand down.
David Stoff has found an app that can be used to make note of the odor. So you'll be hearing more about that soon. And everybody who walks along the Alewife Brook every day, we're really going to need your help with this project. And I think maybe it'll be kind of fun, sort of, if it didn't smell so bad.
Sure. What could not be fun about that?
In the chat, David.
Okay. Sorry, Dave.
Greg.
Hey everyone, sorry I'm just on audio because I'm actually on my way back from a office party thing. But yeah, I guess and so I missed some of the discussion, so I apologize if this is a point of view that's been covered. But when I was looking at the data to write the article for the Boston Globe about the actual MWRA data about the pollution in Alewife, what I was struck by is how upstream of all of the CSOs, the bacterial contamination basically already violated standards. So I've forgotten the exact number and location now, but basically Little River, before any of the CSOs flow into it, and Little Pond, presumably its source, are already bacterially contaminated and doing badly almost all the time. So it's, and I didn't succeed in talking to anyone in Belmont, because that's where all of that would be addressable. But the story I heard about Belmont was that basically, because they don't have much of a tax base other than homeowners, they're going much more slowly than even Somerville, and much more slowly than Cambridge at addressing their sources of pollution that end up in the Little Pond and Little River. So I'm wondering, in a way, if, and I know we don't want to get distracted by alternatives, but if we manage to have a relatively clean source going into Alewife Brook from the beginning, that might be worth investing in. And it might be, I don't know the politics of towns paying for other towns or leveraging state agencies to be more aggressive or whatever, but I feel like potentially the fear of how much they have to pay for CSO cleanup might motivate Cambridge and Somerville to again, shake the trees, try to get something much more rapidly cleaned up in Belmont. And then if cleaner water was coming into the whole Alewife system, that would make a huge difference. It would also allow it to be clearer when the CSOs themselves are the source of the problem, or it's a background phenomenon of a basically polluted waterway that's at times kind of baking itself because of the bad, shallow shape of the stream bed because of the concrete. It's sort of baking itself into the form of an incubator of the bacteria that are already present, and that's a huge issue. And of course, the CSOs contribute to that, but the background is already so bad that it essentially makes it easy not to. It makes it easy to hide the contribution of the CSOs, since it's going into an already sort of screwed up bacterial situation. So I don't know what to do about that or how to bring that into this process. But my worry is that if we don't have a really clear line on that, then essentially the problems we're trying to address won't actually be addressed, even if the CSOs themselves are mostly mitigated. So that's the perspective I just want to add to the discussion.
Thank you, Greg. One of the things that we started talking about was the possibility of releasing water from Fresh Pond into Alewife Brook. It used to be, as you know, it used to be connected. Alewife Brook was connected to Fresh Pond. And so when Cambridge earlier this year stopped using water from Fresh Pond for their water supply because they found PFAS in it, I was kind of hoping, oh, well, maybe that underground spring that feeds Fresh Pond will require an outlet someplace if it's not being used for Cambridge's water supply. But I guess they've opened it back up. They've got some filtration. And so that's not a possibility. But that you're raising a really good point.
I guess one other thing to add to it, that way in which if we could get a bigger focus on the health of Alewife Brook and Little River and Little Pond as a system, and again, bring Fresh Pond into it, because that being severed from Fresh Pond is part of the background conditions here. I think that overall focus on health plus the amount of flood storage that the system needs to be able to handle, like those are not CSO questions exactly, but they are questions that could, if addressed, they could significantly blunt the impact of any CSOs that during the rest of our lifetimes are still released, so that a healthy stream with the right volume of water flowing through it, and not bacterial contamination from all the way from its source, and with room to expand without flooding things. I think that system would be one of, again, that the CSOs would not be able to knock quite as far out of health. And I guess to add one last point to that, the DCR, as far as I can tell, it runs the road next to Alewife. That's all DCR run roadway, the Alewife Brook and Mystic Valley Parkway and all that stuff, Fresh Pond Parkway. And alongside the road are grassy areas that are mowed. And if I kept feeling, again, while I was researching the article, that if someone brought together some really good engineering and visualization of the kind that Eric has been able to pull together for Jerry's Pond, for Alewife, and say, here's what that healthy system with adequate flood capacity actually looks like, given open land, it at least pushes against some of the forces of development and hemming in and all the other things that are happening. And so again, not a CSO question, but the more we develop, the more we take away all those options, and the clearer a vision we have, a clear picture we have of what that healthy stream and river look like, maybe the easier it is to come into these meetings and just say, hey, look at this. This is what we're aiming toward. Because I've seen that work really well for Eric. Basically, I have Jerry's Pond envy. That's what I'm saying.
Lucy?
Yes, there was I mentioned earlier that I had lived within a few blocks of Alewife Brook in the mid-70s into the mid-80s. And someone else mentioned the industrial pollution in the Alewife area. When I lived in East Arlington, Grace Chemical was still in its heyday. And there were times throughout the year when I had to suddenly rush and close my windows because the smell of naphtha was unbelievable. And I'm wondering what the increased flooding, especially with the potential for the overtopping of the Alewife, of the Earhart Dam, could mean for the flushing out and redistribution of old industrial sediments that are currently sort of out of the floodplain, immediate flood way.
It's a good question. Well, this is one of the reasons that we would like to have some dredging done in the brook to get rid of some of the chemicals that are in that sediment. But
And I
that's,
Yeah, in addition to the sediment in the brook, I wonder about other areas adjacent to the brook and in the former Great Swamp that may have been used as repositories for industrial waste. Are those all, to what extent has that been mapped out?
Well, our next speaker probably has some answers to that.
Thank you.
So yeah, Eric might be able to speak to this.
I'm sorry, I missed the question, the detail of the question. I heard it was about Grace. And then I perked up because I was looking at something else. What was the exact question?
Well, Brucey was asking about the map, whether the basically all the pollution that was being dumped out by WR Grace has been mapped out, and I assume, given that IQHQ is developing there right now, they're actually in the process of building.
Sure. Yeah, there are DEP maps that show exactly where where it's been tested, where they've found pollution, and it was pretty extensively tested over probably 20 years or something. I mean, I have those maps, but it's basically the Grace site from Whittemore Ave south to the T Plaza. And then there's some smaller hits on the north side of Jerry's Pond. And then not much on the west side between Alewife Brook Parkway and the pond. Probably more testing needs to be done there, and they're planning to dig there. So I'm sure they will have to do more testing. I mean, it gets, the closer you are to Whittemore, the worse it is, because that's where the factories were. What else can I add? Oh, the sediment was tested in 2021 by IQHQ in the pond itself, and basically found to be largely clean of asbestos, except for a trace and 0.25% on the north side of Jerry's Pond. So that's more detail than you wanted, but I'm glad to talk offline or follow up. I'm not sure exactly how it applies to the Alewife Brook.
I could jump in on that for a moment. Earlier I popped into the chat the surging seas risk zone map. So as we have rising sea level and the potential for the Earhart Dam to be overtopped, then areas that have not been flooded in a long time will be subject to flooding. And who knows what that might wash free that has not seen the light of day in a long time.
Yeah, no, that actually is a good point. And when we met with Conservation Law Foundation a few years ago, they kind of raised that as a potential leverage point to make them clean up the land. I haven't heard much about that since. It would take some investigation and, environmental lawyers, basically. Probably it's a pretty high level thing to do. But what I was gonna, and I'm not sure we can go further like in this forum right now, but it is something worth looking into. What I was gonna raise is just a funny side note. I asked Senator Will Brownsberger about 15 years ago about rewilding that section of Alewife Brook that's in the culvert. This was long before I had no idea it was filled with sewage at the time. I was just thinking it would be beautiful to see a real river and a stream there. It's a really nice stretch. There's some really beautiful stretches there where you feel like you're in the countryside, and the idea of actually looking at a brook with stones and natural feeling would be really wonderful. That's just a little anecdote. The thing I wanted to bring up, and we've talked a lot about odor, and I think it's shocking, and as a public information, a point, like the fact that when you go by that, and I bike by there fairly often, and walk over the bridge, and what you're smelling is raw sewage. I mean, it's like, it's hideous. And I think that probably a lot of people, there's sort of a cognitive dissonance, like, no, that can't actually be what I think it is. And I wonder if some signage, along with guerrilla gardening, maybe some guerrilla signage says, and maybe with a bit of humor, which I think you guys have done a great job of, saying what you're smelling is what you think you're smelling, or something like that. And then say, if you want to learn more, and have a QR code or the website, and just say like this, just to keep raising the temperature on, the fact that it's freaking open sewer in, in 2022. Like it's actually shocking that we have that still. Anyway, I'm just thinking as public communication, it might be something worth trying.
It's a great idea. I mean, really, you can stand on that bridge on Mass Ave and look over into, I mean, what is coming into your nose is access to an open sewer, because the CSO outfall is right there. You can see the hole. So the sewer gases are coming out of the sewer as the sewer and the stormwater drains are both plugged into that. So yeah, Smell Your City, I think, is the app that David Stoff was suggesting. I would love to have one of those park bulletin boards, like a DCR. There's one in the Mystic Park, one of the with a little roof on it where you have a bulletin board. If we had one that would like an interactive community bulletin board, which is a pretty cheap ask of DCR, then people could put their smell reports for each day. But David Stoff might come up with a more high-tech approach to this, so stay posted. But yeah, I think definitely getting people to interact with what they're experiencing. Peg McAdam.
Hi, everybody. Just want to add on an emotional level to this. I mean, we're all talking about it in this very rational way. And plans that we have known about this problem for 115 fucking years. And it's just so upsetting. We're talking about the brook as though it's a thing and it's a commodity and we can use it and we can see it and enjoy it. It's a living, breathing being. Water is a being, and it just breaks my heart that we treat it as a thing, and it has been treated as a thing since the Puritans arrived. And so the environmental justice piece of this is not about just the environmental justice to the people that live around the brook. The environmental justice is to the water, to the trees, to all of the living we're all part of this. It's not a thing. So that's my emotional piece. It also just pisses me off that Cambridge is still allowing development. That Arlington is, acceding to the Mugar development on floodplain. I just don't understand. I don't understand. The dechannelization that has been brought up, I would love to see a map where that's possible. I mean, where I'm living, everything around me has been raised. Dillboy Field is 5 feet higher than this side of the brook. The condo next to me is 5 feet higher than any of Sunnyside. So when a flood happens, Sunnyside is like underwater. So I would love to see a map where it would even be possible to dechannelize the concrete part. Part of it is a cemetery. Now, convince the Catholics to move grave sites. I mean, I don't think that's going to happen. I'm sorry. But anyway, that's my piece. I really appreciate everyone's interest and care about this. But I don't know. At some point, it's just emotionally I'm just grieving for it, really. So,
Can I just thank
thank you.
thank
Yeah.
Peg for that, but also say, please, Peg, and please, everybody, bring your emotions to this meeting on the 15th with the polluters, because they need to understand that we care about this. So please, please bring that and share it. Thanks. I think Greg's next.
Hey, so one other thought. Again, I apologize if it's repetitive of something earlier, but the governance of Alewife is obviously fragmented in dozens of different ways, and even if we say talk about dechannelizing, we're it's not just the usual suspects of Cambridge, Somerville, Arlington, DCR, and MWRA. It's also the natural gas pipelines going through, right? So there's this huge overlapping governance complexities, and then of course there's all the different nonprofits and citizen groups and whatever it is. So again, one takeaway from the research I did for the Globe article was the places tend to thrive when there's a single stable entity that can look to their long-term amelioration. So, and Alewife definitely doesn't have that. In fact, even just the history of DCR and MWRA having formerly been the same agency, but then getting split up, it actually works against a place like Alewife, because DCR can be sort of a non-entity in the whole water quality question, even though it's the landowner of, if that's the right term, of the actual course of the Alewife Brook and the roads next to it. So I wonder, I think it's encouraging, again, that the CSO process is getting multiple municipalities and the state agencies talking to each other. But I wonder if we might also angle for an outcome that involves the creating of a long-term stable governance thing with the regular input of people like us as part of it, so that it's not a crisis and we don't have to piggyback on other plans, like the CSO process that from the EPA lawsuit and whatever. There's actually like this is in the interest of Alewife, and there's sort of a multi-level but singular governance organization that can oversee its can speak for it, so that, because I hear your emotion, Peg, and I feel the same way, and I feel like that kind of concern needs to be in a way reflected in some body that can hold that and hold the image of what Alewife ought to be, and overcome the fragmentation, however long it takes. Okay, sorry, wrong thing.
That's a great thought, Greg. And we do have present, I just want to welcome Senator Pat Jalen, who represents many of us, and Dave Rogers here. And we have a new incoming administration. It would be great if somebody could take some ownership of this. If you have any structural ideas about how to make that happen, it would be super just to have a, government designated point person or something to care about this. Any thoughts?
Oh, are you asking me?
I was asking Senator Jalen or Dave Rogers if they had any ideas about how to make this happen, and if, not to take your turn away, Beth, but just to address Greg's question about having somebody oversee this, even if it was just a temporarily designated position of somebody to say, hey, DCR, take care of this. Hey, DOT, stop dumping oil from Route 16 into the brook. Hey, Cambridge, hey, Somerville, like, get it together. Is that feasible?
We have not had a good, a long tenured commissioner of DCR for at least 5 years. They come and go. They are not often extremely responsive. It took me 6 months to get a meeting about whole bunch of issues. I think the point about a new administration is I think all of the conservation groups are trying to ensure that DCR finally gets some attention in both funding and personnel. So I think joining with those other groups to focus on that. I see the question about the Jerry's Pond too, which I thought there is a plan for that, and that's how that money's going to be spent. Am I wrong in thinking that? I'm going to have to look.
I sent you a separate chat about that, Pat, to follow up offline.
Okay,
but
yes,
there's
and I have to figure out how to save that because I don't know how to do that.
I can email it to you.
Would
I'll
you
email
email
it
it
to you.
to me? So
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to, thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay, sorry.
But I do think that we need a more responsive and better funded DCR. I think that would be my guess. And you guys, I'm really here to listen, but I'm mostly here to listen. I was hoping you would tell me what to do. That's what I want.
We have some ideas, Senator.
We
We have some ideas. Well, you know, we are, as you know, we're hoping to meet with you, and Dave Rogers and Senator Brownsberger, to discuss, and Cindy Friedman as well, to discuss, maybe some legislation to revive the, Alewife master plan. So to update that.
We want to make shovel-ready projects ready so that we can get some infrastructure funds and spend them in this area. But we need to have, you know, numbers and.
So there's no master plan, and there needs to be, and that's a budget ask, among other things.
Yeah.
We should prepare. You have to ask DCR what it would take to do that, and then you ask for it in the budget. So that would be something that we should work toward, I would think.
Yes.
And is David still here? I don't know if David may have had to leave.
No, I'm here.
There you
Yeah, I
are.
mean, that would be a budget ask. And, you know, as Senator Jalen said, that, you know, there has not been a long tenured DCR administrator, but with a new administration, it does present an opportunity. We'll, and as Gwen, as you said, there's going to be, I think it was Gwen, that we're going to have a meeting and we'll get a chance to discuss it further.
Beth, you've been waiting a very long time.
Thank you. I was inspired by Peg to raise my hand. I think we all need to thank her for her eloquent, poetic, and very poignant remarks. I suggest that she and Kristen, if Peg would be willing, I would love to have her videotaped, or whatever you call it, recorded. And why don't we have ACMI do a public service announcement? And I think, and as part of that, I like to think creatively and holistically, as I mentioned. Let's have a wake and let's publicize it. We could have Peg do the invitation, a video invitation. I think it would be really powerful. And again, I refute the notion that this is too expensive to solve. And the 150 years that Peg mentioned, and the fact that our communities and our neighborhoods are being asked to tolerate this is just unacceptable. And so I ask David Rogers, and I ask if the other senator's still on here, I ask them to, and I thank them for coming, and I thank them for their ideas and their actions to date and for their public service. But you can get, I'm assuming, on the agenda for Governor-elect Healy faster than we can. So I just encourage you to do that. And again, Kristen and David Stoff and David White, let me help you. Let's get more signatures on that petition and let's get some publicity. I think you guys need to be on WBUR. I listen a lot, and on GBH. This is only going to be solved, I'm thinking. We need to embarrass DCR and MWRA, and if need be, Governor-elect Healy. You know, we got to take the gloves off. 150 years, it's time enough. And I do think and suggest that we invite the Native American community, the ones that just did that special canoe that they just did, tie into that, invite them to put in an Alewife Brook. So those are my ideas. And thank you again, Peg, for your very thoughtful and remarks. You struck a chord, and I think we need to run with it. So that's my remark. Thank you, everybody, for doing this, for coming together. I really so much appreciate your effort and your creative thinking and people's public service, whether they're on these committees with Jerry's Pond or the people who lamented the loss of the silver maple forest. I mean, all of you. And let's also find out what were the promises that were made prior to that Alewife development and the sacrifice of the silver maple forest, and did they keep them? So that's just my ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. David Stoff.
Yeah. I've managed to unmute. No, while we have both representatives still here, I know you have, well, limited power, but piece of information that I would like is who is going to be the new EOEEA secretary, because they are the chairman of the MWRA board, and that would be a very effective place to have someone who is committed to equity in the harbor cleanup plan. I mean, the Alewife has been left behind, and we may well find ourselves using the environmental justice provisions in MIPA as our only leverage. So having somebody who at least is an effective, well, I wouldn't say negotiator, but at least an advocate for that kind of equity in the EOE and at the upper levels of the Secretariat would be really helpful. So I don't know who it's going to be, but I bet you have an idea. How's that for a question?
That
I have
hasn't
no
been.
idea, but one
Right.
thing that people are doing that I'm recommending that people do is send the transition team suggestions. If you copy
That's a good idea.
Dave and me, we can see if there are any opportunities. We don't have, I mean, we can send in our ideas.
Yes.
We can send our suggestions,
We
but
do
they're
the same,
really
yeah.
coordinated and put together. So, but I think it's a really good idea.
Yeah.
To begin to develop. I think it is a real problem that there's so many different entities involved. And so if some entity would, like DCR, could take leadership, they have never done that in my experience. They have to be dragged in by local groups. And I don't know why Cambridge, for example, or Arlington or Somerville, there's all three of those. So who has ownership? Like Cambridge just gave 600,000. I was not here earlier. I don't know if you talked about it, but gave our funding for Jerry's Pond work, and it has money from that new development for implementation of part of it. So who do we have in city government that could take that kind of leadership? That would be another question, not just, I think the cities are the ones that can work with, particularly the new lieutenant governor who has a lot of interest in local problems. Dave, what do you think?
Yeah, everything you said makes sense. There's been no announcement of the cabinet level secretary, the post that was mentioned, Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs. So, but I think your suggestion to people can email the Healy Driscoll transition team. You can put forward suggestions. We just had from my district, from Arlington, was the Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs, and Climate Katie. She's very pro-environment, and it's certainly an important position. One other thing I wanted to mention is, I have met with MWRA on this, and it is a victory, which was referenced earlier, that we're going to be pushing, and we've gotten commitment to look at rainfall data based on climate change. I mean, when I met with MWRA, they weren't going to do that. I mean, I met with the very senior leadership, and they said, well, we will look at the way it's changed so far, and that in and of itself, I said, but what about future projections? And they said, well, we're not in the weather prediction business. I said, you got to be kidding me. You can't say that straight faced. But anyway, so that is a big victory that was referenced earlier, that rainfall data based on projections will be part of the modeling.
Thank you, Dave, for mentioning that to MWRA when you spoke with them.
Oh yeah, I mean, I was flabbergasted. I mean, it's a stunning assertion.
Yeah, because as you add more rainwater and more dramatic events, the amount of CSO discharges increases in a nonlinear way, which essentially looks exponential. So it's huge that they're including that.
Yes.
Does anybody else have anything that they wanted to bring up?
I just want to add one thing quickly, if I might, that two developments have come up, the Silver Maple Forest and the Mugar development in Arlington. And I guess many of you probably know this, but both of those were fought tooth and nail by Arlington, was unanimously opposed to that and fought it. I mean, town meeting voted against it, the select board, everyone. And both of those developments were, and again, many of you may know this, proceeded under Chapter 40B, the state's affordable housing law. And it's often struck me as strange that people who would likely be natural allies, environmentalists, and those who favor affordable housing, I bet you everybody on this call favors affordable housing, find themselves in that strange position of sometimes being on opposite ends, in that, again, quickly, if you don't have 10% deed restricted affordable housing in your town, or I think a certain percentage of your developable land, then a developer can bypass local zoning and other regulations. And so those were both done over the objections of the towns where they occurred. Both towns, which, by the way, are working diligently to try to create more affordable housing. And anyway, so just so you're aware of that.
The Mugar development is still on hold too, because of more legal action.
Yes, that's right. It's on hold. But that's how they're proceeding under 40B, which is a very powerful tool for developers if a town hasn't hit its threshold of affordable housing. And it has to be said, we do have an affordable housing crisis in this state.
Yep.
Okay, well, thank you all. I think we're going to be done for tonight, are we? You else
Let
want
me
to say
just
anything?
say that we just put the link in the chat to register. We've also sent it out to folks who are on the mailing list to register for the meeting on the 15th.
Yes, it's on the chat.
It would be terrific if as many people as possible showed up. And yeah, so that link is a register, and somebody had asked if it was on Zoom. Yes, it is a registration for a Zoom meeting. And we're really looking forward to seeing everybody there. Thanks so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thanks for caring. And
Thanks.
yeah, and
Yeah.
we're going to CC Dave and Pat on all our messages to the Healy administration to show that we have champions in our corner.
Definitely.
Please spread that information in your next newsletter.
We'll send it out.
Got
Yeah,
it.
we'll send it out.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Good night,
Nice
everybody.
to be with you. Have a good
Night,
evening.
everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great week.
Good night.